The 80s, a decade that radically changed Britain and its society. The music, the riots, the high unemployment rate, the hair, has all become the definition of the 80s. Britain in the 80s, a time of change.
It was the end of the Cold War. America was now the sole superpower. Television became the influential political medium for the first time. It came of age as a global force, and that was a huge change.
Let me state as plainly as I can, there was absolutely no justification, either legal or moral, for what the Soviets did. Despite the savagery of their crime, the universal reaction against it, and the evidence of their complicity, the Soviets still refused to tell the truth.
Cold War tensions were high. Across the world, changes happened. Apartheid collapsed. In Britain, it was the decade where people decided they wanted lower taxes. It was also the time of a new drug, ecstasy. Colorful shirts, lots of hair, and shoulder pads was a common sight in the British streets.
It was a time of colors, happiness, and life.
But what does people actually think about the 80s in Britain?
Britain in the 80s, it was horrible times. My daddy, he was a miner at that time, and yeah, the miners at that time had very bad conditions. All of the miners striked because they had very bad conditions, and that made me come in a very bad position because my mom was dead, and my daddy, he striked all the time, so I didn't have that much time with my parents because
What about brothers and sisters?
I didn't have any brothers or sisters because my daddy didn't have time to raise a kid, and
I didn't really have a bad childhood like him, but my parents had jobs, but we didn't really have a lot of money, so I wanted to be a soccer player, but we didn't really have money, so I was walking with papers at that time, and none of my classmates really liked me because I wasn't going to the arcade like them.
Cool with you, bro.
Yes, at times,
Nice to hear, Brian.
and I didn't really like the evolution of England at that time. There were too many colors and the music, didn't really like it at all.
Oh, okay.
yeah, me too.
Britain changed more in the 1980s than in almost any recent decade. It was an interesting and turbulent time for the British people. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister through the whole decade. She really changed Britain during her term. Britain became more America-like, more liberal because she was cutting the taxes, spendings, regulations, and encouraged people to make their own way up in the world by themselves.
It was the decade where Canada, New Zealand, and Australia got fully separated from the British government. Britain also regained its military confidence by sending a navy task force to the Falkland Islands after Argentina attacked the Isles.
Margaret Thatcher privatized many state-owned industries, and Britain moved from being a heavy industry economy to being a service economy. The first step in that process was to close the coal mines. This shift in Britain's economy meant that hundreds of factories were closed and unemployment was high, especially in the north of England. Instead of realizing that times change, Many people blamed Margaret Thatcher for their hardships. That resulted in the mine strikes from 1984 to 85, and many other violent clashes between police and protesters throughout the nation.
The 80s was the decade of many new technologies, like the introduction of Walkmans. Now, people could listen to music wherever they went, or the invention of the mobile phone, which were absolutely enormous. Only wealthy people could afford it, even though were so expensive it took hours to charge, and the batteries didn't last more than 10 minutes.
But the phone and the Walkman weren't the only gadgets introduced in the 80s. Things like microwave ovens, remote-controlled televisions, VHS, and satellite TV were also invented during the 80s.
Kids started playing arcade games like Pac-Man. The Philo fax were extremely popular. The more addresses and phone numbers you had in it, the more popular you were.
The 1980s will be remembered for its music. Rock bands used synthesizers and keyboards and made their own music videos. The sound of the 80s rock is very distinctive and started in Britain, during Margaret Thatcher's time as the Prime Minister. Indeed, Margaret Thatcher did more to influence the music industry and the sound of rock music itself than any other elected official.
Bands such as Duran Duran, The Police, Sting, Wang Chun, Samantha Fox, Genesis, A Flock of Seagulls, The Human League, and many, many more. All ultimately owe the phenomenal commercial success to Margaret Thatcher.
In short, the 1980s were Margaret Thatcher's decade.